guys. Today I have my good friend and amazing friend, Anita Patel. Friend is not even the appropriate word. It's actually my sister.
I was gonna say we're sisters.
Exactly. I feel like we've probably known each other, for over a year, maybe 2 years now?
At least, yeah. I mean, definitely, I feel like at least 2 years,
Yeah.
but very close for the past year.
Yeah. So it's a true honor to have you on here today.
Well, thank
And
you for having me.
So for those of you guys who don't know Anita, I'll just tell you a little bit more about her. So Dr. Anita Patel is an attending in pediatric critical care medicine at Children's National Medical Center and an assistant professor of pediatrics at George Washington School of Medicine and Health Sciences. She completed a BA at the University of Pennsylvania in neuroscience with a minor in healthcare management from the Wharton School, followed by her MD from the University of Virginia, pediatrics at residency at Cornell, and she also completed a pediatric critical care fellowship at Columbia University. In addition to caring for critically ill children, Dr. Patel is dedicated to further research to advance care for critically ill pediatric patients. Her initial focus during residency and fellowship centered on the validation of a pediatric delirium score, the Cornell Assessment of Pediatric Delirium that is now used in PICUs across the world. Dr. Patel now has a grant from the NIH to apply big data and artificial intelligence to study sedation, analgesia, and neuromuscular blockade practices in children cared for in the pediatric intensive care unit. She's also a founding board member of AHSM. You can also find her on social media. She's on Instagram as Anita K. Patel MD. Is that correct? It's Anita K.
That's
Patel.
absolutely right.
Also known as, she used to be Yoga Doc MD. So she's also certified, a yoga instructor, certified yoga instructor. And she also did create a meditation exercise in Expected, right? With Expected?
Expectful.
Expectful. So yeah, so I'm happy to have you here. I feel like that just scratches the surface of the amazing work that you do.
Well, I don't know about that. I think those are the major things. I guess besides being a mom.
Yes, also a mom, also a new mother like me. So
yes, we are mom sisters.
So that is how we actually became connected, is through, Instagram. So it's been amazing. So I'm going to get started here. I wanted to just talk to you a little bit more about your path and why you chose a career in research medicine.
Yeah, so I mean, I feel like it's a question I get a lot. And, I have a pretty honest answer to it. I've had a rather long research career, even though I feel like I'm still relatively young as a attending. I've just been attending now for 5 years. But my research career actually started in high school. So I started at the NIH as a high school student doing just bench research.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's one of those, I'm really lucky because I live in the Washington, D.C. area, and the NIH is right in my backyard. It's in Bethesda, Maryland. So, I am one of those lucky people. I've known I wanted to be a doctor my whole life. I don't fully understand how I knew that because I don't actually have doctors in my family, but I just always wanted to be a doctor. It just really appealed to me. And honestly, and this is why I'm going to say I'm going to be honest, is that I was number one, the idea of working in a lab as a high school student really excited me because it sounded interesting and I've always loved science. And then the other piece of the puzzle, and this is why it's kind of the truth, is I was this is going to help me get into college, right? And I say that because, I'm sure people from all stages of medicine, pre-med, high school, wherever, they're probably watching this. And it's important to know that it's okay to try things solely because you're this is going to strengthen my application. And that's what I did. I did it. And I actually really liked it. So I spent a year in this lab, and it really sort of opened the doors to laboratory science for me. I then, when I was in college at Penn, was like, you know what, I want to continue more lab-based research to see if I like it. So I got into a neuroscience lab at Penn. My major was in neuroscience, as you mentioned. And that was one of the best experience I've had, for the sole purpose that it actually proved to me that I was not a bench researcher and that was not what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I think I did research in that lab for a year and a half. I ended up publishing then, and I did my honors thesis in that lab too. And as I said, it was a good experience, and it was actually a great lab to work in. But I realized, like, I was doing these 5 to 7 day long protocols. I would literally half the time mess up these protocols at like day 5 and have to start over. And it just wasn't how my brain worked. I didn't like having to run to the lab at midnight to like pipette something. I realized this wasn't the lifestyle I wanted. And I feel like at the time I was just starting to miss the reasons why I loved medicine. I realized I needed to be with patients. So I finished that research, but then I actually pursued clinical research at Penn. So and how I got into this particular clinical research was totally random. I knew I wanted to apply for more clinical-based research projects, and I randomly found this Center for Obesity Medicine at Penn. And I started to help run, and then ended up running in my year off before med school, some clinical trials centered around how like almonds affect your lipid profiles, how diet and exercise can help with sleep apnea, some really cool studies. And I loved it. I loved it so much, as I said, I stayed on into that clinical research program in my year off before med school, because I just loved the research, and I loved that I was actually with patients. I was running like, some interventions with them. So that was also a really important experience for me, because I realized that there was a place for research in my life, that I loved being with patients, and I loved seeing how research could directly improve their lives. Like, it was really an important experience for me to have the bench research and the clinical research experience. And I'd be remiss not to mention again that I also knew this was going to help me get into med school, and that's okay. And I'm glad that, that sort of motivation to make sure I had a strong application exposed me to all these things, because it truly ended up shaping my career. And really, that's how my research career started. I continued research in med school, but it was really in residency that once I decided I wanted to do critical care, the way I really got into my current research is I literally looked at the critical care department at Cornell and was like, who do I want to be in this department? And there was one particular woman, Dr. Hani Traub, who had 4 kids, she had 3 kids at the time, was pregnant with her 4th. She was an amazing, amazing, amazing doctor. Just phenomenal. And then she also was doing really groundbreaking research. And I was like, that's who I want to be. Like, that is who I want to be. And I would tell anyone that is considering any career to find that person that sort of emulates everything you want. And she was that person for me. So I just was like, hey, can I talk to you? We chatted, and I was like, do you have any research I can get involved in? And she's like, sure. And that really started a 6-year-long relationship where I helped validate this delirium screening tool with her. And it was a great experience because she actually went on maternity leave at the time. So I really ended up running the study while she was on maternity leave. And then we published 2 papers during residency. And then in my fellowship, I continued delirium research. And that really brought me to, as an attending, I realized I love delirium, but one of the major causes of delirium is the types of sedative and pain medications we use. So I really brought into my focus to sedation and analgesia in addition to delirium as an attending. But you asked me, that was a long-winded answer, but really the answer was that's how I got into it is, every step of the way it was exposing myself to things and then deciding who I wanted to be like and kind of following her along. And although we don't do research together anymore, she's 100% a career mentor and someone that I still call when I'm struggling or need advice. And so it's been a really great experience.
No, that's amazing. Actually, my next question for you was like, did you have a mentor that kind of advised you on your career path and kind of helped guide you? And, you answered it for me. So that's
yeah. And I mean, because this is such an important question, I feel like I just want to spend a minute on it because I did have an early career mentor who, again, is still absolutely a career mentor for me. But particularly for people that want to pursue a research career, I can't really impress upon you enough how important it is to have an appropriate mentor. And when we say the word appropriate mentor, I say this from experience because I've had a range of mentors, not great ones and very good ones. And what I would always suggest to someone who wants to do research is find a mentor that's far enough along in their career that they can support you with experience and also not compete with you. And I know that sounds a little bit weird. And when I say compete, of course, if they're beyond you, they're not competing with you in the sense that they're beyond you. So you're not a peer to them, but you want to be with a mentor that is not going to be afraid to hand you a project that you can really make it your own. Because when you're early in your career, and frankly, I'm actually kind of in that boat, you need as many first author publications as you can. So handing over a project that you're still going to be heavily doing a lot of work on, it's hard to do that and not sort of have that be one of your first author publications. So, right now, my mentor, he's truly at the end of his career. He has no problem handing me as many projects as I want as for being like the first or senior author, because he has literally 500 publications. One more publication for him is meaningless. And also he has, he's at the end of his career. So his joy now is really shaping the younger, crop of scientists in our field. So having him as someone that not only has the time for me, but also is truly invested in me developing my career has truly been the secret to success for me as an attending. And, it's not just me who has this opinion. As you mentioned, I have an NIH grant, and part of the early career award NIH grants, the way that they're scored is 1/3 is based on the person who's applying for the grant, 1/3 is based on the institutional support for you, and 1/3 is actually who is your mentorship team. So only 1/3 is actually the candidate, and the rest is how much support your institution is giving to you and how strong your mentorship team is. And that just tells you that if you don't have the right mentorship team, even the NIH at this point knows that you will not be successful. So, finding the right mentor, delaying applying for that grant or developing your career until you find that right mentor is really, it's the key to success.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think that, I think it's so important also to just understand like everyone's path is different. I mean, for example, like I've had friends who have chosen a career in academic medicine or in research medicine, they got a grant and then they realized it wasn't for them. They were doing like a combined research residency program, and in the middle of it, they were like, wait, I just want to do clinical medicine. And for you, it was like that differentiation when you decided you wanted to do clinical research versus basic science research. I feel like, I mean, from what I know from you or your experiences and others, that research medicine is really, it can be, it's not always like a smooth path, you know, there's
No,
ups and downs, and you kind of just have to figure out what's best for you. And I think that's where mentorship comes out to be
absolutely.
very important.
Yeah.
Um, so like a little bit more about the work you're doing, because I feel like we don't talk enough about like how much of a badass you are, you know.
No, 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 no.
You know, I mean, you're doing research, and when I talk to you, you're taking a data science course, you're learning about AI. I mean, I feel like in medicine, we don't always, as physicians, practicing physicians, we aren't able to really focus on that, focus on AI, focus on how it will impact medicine in the future.
Yeah.
So, why don't you tell us a little bit more about the research you're doing?
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, to take a step back, if you'd asked me 5 years ago if I would be doing data science, artificial intelligence, I would have laughed at you because I really have never been a computer person, like a supercomputer person. It was not an interest of mine
Yeah.
prior to becoming an attending. And the truth is almost similar to what I told you about when I found sort of that woman that I looked up to and was like, I want to be her. It was a similar situation where, similar but different. I knew the content that I wanted to study. I knew I wanted to study sedation and analgesia, and I wanted to study the consequences of them. And I had the experience in fellowship of literally spending, I actually can't even tell you how many hours I spent collecting data from the EMR manually. And I was like, this is not something, I want to do the research, but I do not want to be manually collecting data like this. This is absurd, and it takes way too many hours. And it seemed like unnecessary hours to me. And so although I had the content that I wanted to do, I didn't know how to go about doing it. And my mentor, who was actually not my mentor at the time, I had been talking to him because, as I told you, he's just a great researcher. So I was bouncing my ideas off of him and sort of telling him what I wanted to do, but I was trying to figure out a way to do it in a more efficient way. And he's like, well, I have this large database. He's like, if you want to be part of my group, and the group involves data scientists, statisticians, doctors, you can be a part of the group, but you're going to have to contribute to it. And we will give you this data and you can do whatever you want with it. But in return, I want you to learn how to use this data. I don't want you to totally rely on the data scientists because they're doing our big project. They can help you, but you need to be more independent. So that was kind of how I got my foot in the door. And the way that I started to learn about data science was really first just watching what this data scientist in our group was doing and seeing what type of programs he was using. And I asked him, and also the senior data scientist in the group, like, where should I start? How can I use this large data repository to study sedation and analgesia? And they're like, you need to learn SQL in order to gain independent access to the database. So that's what I did. First, I was just watching YouTube videos, and I learned enough that I was able to access the data, but I realized there was a certain cap to just YouTube videos. So then I took a couple intensive week-long courses in SQL, and I also have taken Python programming. And what that's allowed me to do is two things. Number one, I can access the database independently, so I don't have to constantly be asking our data scientists, hey, can you get this chunk of data for me? So that's helped to be able to do some on my own. But the truth is, as a physician, I'm never going to be as good as they are at getting the data quickly and starting to program some machine learning algorithms. I'm never going to be as good at them. But what happened, because I did learn sort of the baseline skills of data science and data science languages, or computer program languages rather, I was able to communicate with the data scientists in a way that none of the other physicians in our group, and even my mentor, could communicate with them. And learning how to talk data science or talk machine learning, and you know this, you have experience in it, is so important. And that's a skill that not a lot of physicians have. Even, and I've been to a lot of these artificial intelligence and medicine conferences, and even there's doctors that sort of work with data scientists, but actually none of them have really learned, not none of them, but a lot of them haven't learned the programming languages. And again, I'm not learning them to be an expert and be better at the data scientist, but it does allow me some independence, but it really allows me to also communicate with them. And because of that, the speed with which I can do my projects is much faster. And I like to sort of learn skills, because although, yes, my current career is research, and maybe it will be for the rest of my life, I don't know yet. But it also, as you mentioned, there aren't a lot of physicians who are doing this. And really, I've just seen with every step of the way that it's opening doors to other careers if I so choose. And, as you mentioned, life changes and goals change. And my goals have not pivoted right now, but I know enough now, especially after having my daughter, to know that, life goals and like the time that you're willing to spend on something just changes because you have outside things. So it's an exciting field to be a part of right now. And I'm excited to sort of continue to learn and understand these languages and understand how we can apply them to develop algorithms.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I see AI being used, and I feel like AI is like a hot Nate term for like a lot of things. It's like a hot topic, and everyone will like hear that word and they're like, ooh, but there's a lot behind it, and it's not just about that. I feel like it's definitely improved. Research has definitely allowed people to analyze large amounts of data. So do you see these types of courses becoming a part of medical education in the future, or do you see it becoming like a requirement for research scientists?
I don't see it becoming, I don't think that our crop of sort of physician researchers, I don't see them learning computer languages. What I do see them learning are concepts, though. And I think what I do see already becoming slowly sort of being adopted in research education for doctors is data safety, because as we have more access to data, sort of understanding the changing sort of field of HIPAA with regard to these big databases is really important. And I do think that for students that want to get into clinical research, there is going to have to be some sort of curriculum around accessing data, around working with data scientists, because I think the times of having, your research staff collecting data manually from the electronic medical record, that's going to go away. So I think understanding languaging around getting data, understanding the capabilities of data and also the limitations of data, I think I see that becoming part of a research curriculum. And I think the data safety piece is going to be for beyond research, but for all trainees. I think that is already starting to come into play, and I think it's just going to get more and more important and a bigger part of standard curriculum. So yeah, absolutely. Do I think that all trainees are going to learn computer languages? No. But I do think that language around it, and as I said, safety is going to be a big part of the newest crop of researchers.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, they talk like now that, there's a lot of discussion about healthcare data. There's also a lot of discussion about privacy, about ownership of that healthcare data, who owns it. And, patients and doctors have to be careful about where their data is going. There's been discussions where I think Facebook tried to buy data from a large hospital system, and it's going to become, I think, a more relevant topic in the future.
It is. And, COVID has accelerated a lot of that because, for better, I think in a lot of ways, that I feel like we've all been pushing to have data more available, obviously in a very de-identified way. And COVID made that just depression issue, and that caused Cerner to release. So one of the database that I've been working with so far has been called HealthFacts, and that's taking data from all Cerner, all hospitals that use Cerner, de-identifying, jumbling it. Takes a long time for them to process it and then send it over. And suddenly they were making it available to researchers across the country, which was wonderful and necessary and something that I was hoping that they would do. And COVID kind of gave them the push to be like, we need to make this available so that doctors can figure out, what's going on with this disease and how can we better take care of patients. And actually I submitted a grant with people over in California to hopefully develop algorithms for, to help better care for our pediatric COVID patients. So it's been really cool to see how a horrible, horrible disease has hopefully sort of accelerated data availability and data safety practices, which I think will sort of trickle down for years to come beyond COVID.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. Like COVID has accelerated so much technology in healthcare. I mean, telemedicine, just look at telemedicine.
Oh my gosh.
Like the fact that CMS started reimbursing for telemedicine visits during COVID. I mean, before that, so many physicians were so skeptical about telemedicine, and they would continue to see patients in the office. And it's just interesting how medicine has evolved.
Absolutely.
Just that respect. And there's so much more coming, I think, through the pipeline.
Yeah.
So I guess like my next question kind of relates to what we've been talking about is like 15 or 20 years from now, a lot of people say medicine will be very different from the way we're practicing now. And, if you were to look in a crystal ball, what do you see? How do you see your field of pediatric critical care medicine being practiced differently?
Yeah, so I think that's a really good question, because this is where the distrust in artificial intelligence comes from, as I know doctors sometimes get scared, like, am I going to be replaced by it? And I know that was a big issue, particularly with radiologists, right? Because there were these really high fidelity machine learning algorithms that were seemingly performing as a radiologist. And what I would say is that I don't see artificial intelligence, machine learning, any of these things ever replacing doctors, because you're always going to need a doctor to check these systems. So that's the one thing I would say is I don't think that any of these things are ever going to replace us. I think they're going to enhance our care. So how do I see these algorithms sort of helping us in 10 to 15 years? I think that we are going to have better early warning systems in pediatric critical care. So for example, right now, many hospitals across the country are using this thing called the PEWS system, which is essentially a nurse led early warning score, where they manually look at like what the heart rate is, blood pressure, pain scores, things like that. And they put it into the electronic medical record. And if it's at a certain level in my particular hospital, it causes what we call a rapid response, where the PICU has to come down and assess the patient. Now, one of the things that I've been working on with my mentor is we've been developing a data-driven early warning score. So not something that a nurse has to sort of fill out, and it's very subjective, but actually using objective data from the electronic medical record to tell a care team that, hey, you should be worried about this patient. And it really takes all the opinions out of it. Now, all that'll do is create an alert that then the doctor has to come see this patient. But particularly on the regular inpatient floor, where it's one nurse to 4 patients or more, depending on what hospital you're in, and one doctor to 50 patients, that could save lives, right? Like if you don't even need to go into the room, but actually are just taking all the data that's in the electronic medical record already, and then telling a team, hey, you should worry about this patient, and they come and assess that patient more frequently. So that's one sort of concrete example of how I think, these artificial intelligence algorithms can actually really enhance our care. Another way that I could see it, I think that the other way that I can concretely see artificial intelligence helping is accelerating research. So, as I mentioned, right now, still even in my hospital, though a couple of us are working with these big data repositories, I know so many people that are still manually extracting data from the electronic medical record because we still don't have a good system of automating that extraction. I think that once we have the ability to get data, and I think in 15 years, we're going to be able to get really high quality data. So data from, your notes and things like that, that will literally take what it would normally take us a year to get data in a good place, that'll take maybe an hour. And just think of the amount of research that we can do that can directly impact our patient lives. And then I think also just, we have so much in an ICU and the OR suite, like you're an anesthesiologist, there's so much, vital sign and medication data that's sort of being pumped into the electronic medical record. What if, again, right now, that data, I think we can learn from it and in real time act on it. So I told you about an early warning score that we could have in the regular inpatient floor. We could have a similar score in the pediatric ICU that can tell us, hey, this is a patient that we need to be really worried about. And, I work in a 48-bed ICU where we have a lot of nurses, but we can't have 48 doctors and one-on-one, physician to patient ratios. Yeah. So again, having objective data to tell us who we should be more worried about, I think is where the first step of where I see artificial intelligence creating a direct impact on patient care. And then of course, sort of accelerating research, which I think we're already seeing that, and it's just going to be that much more easy in 10 to 15 years.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the data would in terms of anesthesia, we talk a lot about, what the future holds for us. And, I think I foresee us, especially in anesthesiologists who often work with CRNAs or anesthesia assistants, many of us may be covering multiple rooms and have a portal where we have a snapshot of the vital signs and also ventilation settings and medications that are being given, all in one portal where we can all monitor multiple rooms at once. And I'm sure the analysis of data will be more rapid. So there may be, more alerts about this patient is higher risk for decompensation versus another. So I think that's definitely in our future in so many settings, not just in the OR, but also
Absolutely.
in the ICU,
Absolutely.
Which has its pluses and minuses. I think now I go to sleep and sometimes I hear vital signs in my sleep,
I know. My husband jokes, when we first were together, he was like, I would sort of say like epinephrine or, and he was like, you literally are dreaming and as if you're in the ICU. And I was like, yeah, that's, it's alarm fatigue and alarm. Yeah, it's just how we're trained to multitask now. And you're right about the minuses of it, in your example, and I think about that in the ICU too, once we have these capabilities to do a lot more at home or manage more things at once, that is probably going to increase the burden on single doctors over, multiple. So there are going to be consequences, and those consequences will have to be dealt with. I think the doctors are going to have to be better advocates for themselves, which, let's be honest, we're not always the best advocates. So
I mean, I think that's why it's so important to the research that you're doing. And that's kind of why I've started this, is because I think it's so important for us as physicians to become involved or become aware of what's going on, or different companies, different technologies that are coming through the pipeline, so that we can be advocates for ourselves and our patients.
Absolutely.
So it's definitely been interesting. I've definitely met with some really interesting people. So who are working on some really amazing projects and are starting new companies. So, I think that it's definitely will help medicine, but I also think we have to be cognizant of how it'll affect our practice.
Yeah, we do. And you hit the nail on the head. If doctors are not involved, it will evolve beyond us without us getting choices in the matter. So having people like you, researchers, it's so essential, because it's going to happen whether we like it or not. So we better get involved at the ground so that we can shape how it's going to go. Because I know a lot of people are scared about this stuff. They don't like it, so they want to ignore it or say, you know what, I don't want to have anything to do with it. The truth is, whether you like it or not, it's going to be a part of our practice. So the more that we get involved with it, the more we can decide how it's going to be incorporated in our practice and in our patient care. And that's kind of where I'm at now.
Yeah, totally. I mean, look at EMR, right? I mean, EMR, initially there were many physicians that were resistant, to, oh, I don't want to have EMR in my office, or and it became a mandate. And then suddenly it was required that all physicians have EMR in their office. And physicians in hospitals, it was just like literally put upon them, and it's very challenging for physicians who've been practicing for quite a long time. I mean, it's definitely a learning curve. And that may be us like 30 years from now.
I'm sure it will be. Yeah. It's going to be something else. Yeah.
There's going to be something for us that it's going to be challenging for us to adapt to in our practice. Absolutely. So it'll be interesting.
There'll always be something new.
Yeah, we're going to be asking our daughters for help. Like,
exactly.
For the audience, we actually have babies that are about a month apart in age. So they're
going to be like, oh, our parents.
Exactly. They're going to be like, you're so annoying. How do you not know how to do this, Mom?
Exactly. It's going to be payback.
Exactly. Moving on to the next question, and it's relevant to everything we've kind of talked about. What's like the one piece of advice you have for someone who's interested in pursuing a career in academic medicine?
So a couple things. I would say the first thing, and I'm just going to say it again, is find the right mentor. And one thing I would tell you also is that even if you're not in academic medicine, but I'll just speak to academic medicine because that's what I know, you should have a career mentor and you should have a research mentor. Now, often those will overlap, but I often think even if they do overlap, that it's important to have both. And I'll tell you why. So first of all, research mentor, I think I already mentioned the necessary parts of it, so I won't repeat myself. But it is absolutely essential to your career, whether you even want to pursue grants or not, to have a good mentor who can guide you in how to conduct research projects the right way, help you write up your research projects. All of that is essential. And a career mentor is also really important because they're not just looking at your sort of day-to-day, making sure you get your projects done, but they're looking at the overall picture. And for me, I feel like I have two. One is my old research mentor from residency and fellowship. And then my other is my boss. And I feel like both of them together really help me make those long-term decisions. And really when I'm struggling with, and you sort of went through this with me, I just applied for my next NIH grant. And I applied for that when I was, thank you.
I'm laughing because I know it was a lot of work. Okay.
Very excited I did it. But you know this because I talked to you about it. I didn't want to do it, and I think part of it was, it's a lot of work. And I was 3 months postpartum when I started to seriously work on it. And I just was like, I don't think this is the right time. And the truth is my research mentor, of course, is going to tell me it's the right time because he wants me to succeed in my research career. And that's sort of his blinders are on my research career. And it's so important that he has those blinders on because it makes me move forward. So I respect him for that. And, we published together. So of course he has, personal motivation too, not to say I think truly he's thinking about me, but of course he has personal motivation for us to produce more papers so that we can get bigger grants and more grants. And, that's the currency of research. But when I was really struggling with that decision about whether to apply for the grant, I really looked to my old research mentor, who again, I now consider a career mentor, because not only do I respect her research career and where her clinical and academic career has gone, but she, as I mentioned, also has 4 kids. And I knew that she cared about her family and cared about her children, and somehow has weaved this whole thing together. So I looked to her when I was making that decision and was like, is this really the right time? Is this the right decision? And I trust her too. And when she said, you know what, you should just do it, I stopped thinking and I just did it. So having both of those pieces together, and understanding what the motivations behind both those two people were. My career mentor, who I call her now, she doesn't have any personal interest or investment in she cares about me, but she doesn't have any extra competing interests, rather, is what I'll say, to eating, right? It's just that she cares about me and wants to make sure I have the right path. And that was really important for me to have that. So I didn't think that maybe she was telling me to do something because she had some personal investment in me doing it. So that is the one piece of advice I'd have for anyone, is make sure that you have, specific mentors in your research, but also overall career mentors who you really trust. Because there are going to be, life gets more and more complicated as you get older, as we both know, and making sure that you have a team of people behind you that you can look to is just incredibly important. And also, just to mention it, having peer mentors also has been really important for me. People that are, and I call them peer mentors, even though they're really 5 to 10 years ahead of me. It's been really nice to have people, my mentor, as I told you, he's at the end of his career and has got incredible insight into things, but sometimes he forgets or doesn't remember what it was like, where I'm at, or in 5 years from where I am at now. And I have another mentor, I call her a peer mentor at work, who is about 5 to 10 years ahead of me. And she really can speak to what I'm going through, having just gone through it, so having people like that, I truly have a lot of people that I look to for advice, for concrete advice, and also just life advice on, whether I'm doing what they would have done when they were in my shoes. So I really built up a team of people that I look to, and honestly, I don't think I could do what I do without having them.
That's amazing. And I'm sure, I know you're a mentor to so many others as well. So you're paying it forward, because I think
you have to, right? And it's and I love doing research with, and it's funny because I'm research mentor to 3 different fellows, and then I'm kind of a career mentor to 3 others, and although I always remind them, like, you better be talking to people beyond me too, it's nice to sort of be able to give back. Exactly what you said. It's a cycle, right? And I want to be the kind of mentor that I would have wanted, so.
Yeah, exactly. And it's amazing just to have, I think that's one good thing about social media. It's brought many people together, and where we have a community of women physicians.
Absolutely.
We have people we can speak to about different life decisions or career choices. And it's not easy, even though we finished residency and fellowship and we're practicing, we still have different decisions that we often have to make, different paths that we can choose. And, having this community is super important. So I think
it totally is. And I wouldn't have gotten through my postpartum without you and our other friends who had gone through pregnancies together. And I will say, particularly knowing you, it taught me, because I've always been my blinders have always been on academic medicine. And it's been great to get to know you and a couple others that have different careers from me, because it also tells me that, if one day I decide this is not for me, I do have other great options. And so I can't underestimate the power of social media. I actually have a Facebook group called, not me, but there's a community on Facebook called Academic Research Moms. And I joined it, soon after I was postpartum because one of my old co-fellows told me about it. And that community has been so amazing just to navigate the specifics of an academic research career as a mother, and having them as a sounding board too has been just, I can't even tell you. I remember at 3 a.m. one night, I was just writing posts on there and I would get responses immediately, you know, and it's just to have those peer mentors that I would never have discovered without social media has been truly life-changing. I don't know if there's any other word to put it, like between you and a couple other people, it's just been, yeah, it's truly life-changing, and you wouldn't have those opportunities without social media.
Well, I would like to say I feel very lucky to have you. Feel very lucky to have met you. I mean, like, yeah, I don't know how I would have gotten through IVF and multiple cycles and all the heartache and all of that without you. So
I feel the same way.
So we're going to kind of close off the talk, finish up the talk now. I mean, I could talk to you for hours, but
we do.
pretty much, pretty much. But I wanted to ask you if there's any reading that, like, any new podcasts that you listen to on a daily basis. What are your favorite books? Because I feel like, you know, some people have different things that they read and different places that they've found a lot of insight from. So there's any?
Yeah. So it's funny you asked that. So I feel like when it comes to my like reading and podcasts, it's more outside of my field than inside of my field, because I truly need, like, that's where I have my, I don't know, my release from my research, which frankly takes up most of my life. So there is one podcast that is within my field that I do listen to called Critical Care Now that I really like. But beyond that, the other podcasts I listen to are all just for fun. Like This American Life and Reveal are like my two absolute favorites, and they keep me up to date on what's going on in the world. And in terms of reading, it's really totally out, random, like Michelle Obama to now I'm reading Barack's, it's just, I feel like my reading is always just for fun. So that might not be the answer you wanted to hear, but but you know what? It's important to know that just because we're doctors, we're not sitting and reading medical journals all the time. And for me, because my career is not a 9-to-5 job, it's, research goes 24 hours a day. I find that when I'm doing reading or podcasts, I need to just let it go and enjoy myself. And there might be a Bachelor podcast here and there that I also listen to. So, you know what?
Which one is that? I didn't even know there was a Bachelor podcast.
Oh, there are many.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
There's like reality TV podcasts as well, but
exactly.
I'm a huge fan of This American Life. I have to try Reveal. I have never
listened to it. You have to try Reveal. It's phenomenal. It's just in-depth reporting about generally current issues. So it's amazing.
Yeah, I also like The Daily because that it's like 20 minutes and it's a lot of in-depth investigative reporting.
Yeah.
And one last question for you was about is it about was about industry and having a career in medicine? I know you kind of touched on it, and there's so many for me, I have a career in private practice. I do research, and I also do work with various companies and startups. As an academic physician, do you think it's possible to have a career where you do work with industry? I mean, I feel that many times in academic medicine, there can be a little bit of resistance. Maybe I'm wrong, but
no, you're right. You're right.
I wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
So you're right. There is. And I will say this, one caveat is it depends where you are as well. And it depends on the institution you're at. So do I think it's possible? Yes, it is absolutely possible. I think thing that you need to know is to protect yourself if you're in academic medicine, and remind yourself that everything that you produce while you're under the guise of an institution, whether it's academic or not, by the way, but I'll speak to academics, it's not owned by you. It's owned by the institution. If you develop that idea while you're working for that institution. And I say that very deliberately because let's say right now I'm at Children's National, as you said, and GW. And if I even come up with an idea while I'm at Children's National, and I'm like, hey, this is a great idea, I should quit my job and run with it. If they can tie the fact that you were employed by them while you came up with that idea, it technically still could be theirs.
Yeah.
So you just have to understand that. And not to say that you can't still get royalties or get, profits from whatever idea you make, but a large percentage is still likely going to be owned by your institution.
That's true. That's a very important point. I know physicians that have done it many ways. Like I know a physician who developed, invented a device while working at an academic institution. He does get a percentage of royalties, but at the same time, the institution, was able to help him with the legal process. So
Exactly.
the patenting process, that in itself is so costly. The lawyers and the intellectual property guidelines and things like that. So he was able to get help with that, but he does get a percentage of royalties, but he was able to deflect a lot of the costs that are associated with developing that product.
And my institution is very similar. They actually encourage us to, we have a whole IP department, and they actually encourage us, if we remotely think we have something that is worth protecting, to talk to them. And they're available to us all the time. And I mentioned to you, like my mentor and I've been working on algorithms. We've run our algorithms by them multiple times because there could be something there that is that could be marketable. And so there are major benefits to being under an academic institution. And I have also known, it's funny, you asked me this question before and I thought about it. There's also possibilities of going part-time at your institution and having your own thing outside of that. It's just a matter of, the biggest piece of advice I'd give to anyone that is even considering doing something like that is make sure that you protect all your ideas in a way that makes sense. So again, if you are going off and doing a part-time job at an industry place, make sure that you have put it in your contract that all of those things are separate from your current job. Or, we have a mutual friend who has tons of ideas all the time and tons of businesses. And, I know that she worked for an academic institution before, and she made sure that when she applied to that academic institution, that all the ideas that she was coming into that job with were completely separate and her own, and they had nothing to do with her job at that academic institution. So there are many ways to do it. Having an institution support you or coming up with ideas while you're maybe government grant funded is still great. You just have to know that, it's not necessarily just your own product anymore. And that's 100% fine. And there's so many benefits to it. It's just making sure and are not surprised when you thought you had a multi-million-dollar idea and suddenly you're only seeing a couple of percentage points of that. But I think that there's a place for both.
Exactly. Definitely. And that's where mentorship comes in. There's so many people you can talk to about this. Sometimes there's colleagues that may have had experience with this. So don't hesitate to ask questions.
Absolutely. Totally agree.
Thank you so much, Anita, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to listen to all of these.
Well, it's a true honor to have you on today, and I'm sure we'll chat again soon, probably in a few minutes. But before we close, where can the audience find you?
Yeah, so I'm at Anita K. Patel, MD. on Instagram. I just started a TikTok as well, so I'm hoping to educate on there. Let's see. But those are really Instagram is my primary home, and that's where you can find me.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let me just stop recording.